The sun rises slowly over a quiet valley in southern Greece. Mist hangs low above the river Alpheus, moving like breath across the land. Olive trees stand still, their silver leaves catching the first soft light of morning. There are no stadiums here yet, no crowds roaring, no flags, only dust, stone, and silence. This place is called Olympia, and in the year 776 BCE, no one knows that history is about to begin. Long before the world spoke of records and medals, this land belonged to the gods. Olympia is not a city. It is a sacred space, a holy ground. People do not live here permanently. They come only for worship, for offerings, and for rituals that tie humans to something greater than themselves. At the heart of this place stands an altar to Zeus, king of the gods, ruler of the sky, the thunderer who watches from above. To the ancient Greeks, Zeus is not a story. He is real. He listens. He judges. In these early days, Greece is not one country. It is a patchwork of city-states, each proud, each jealous, each often at war. Sparta trains for battle. Athens argues and dreams. Corinth trades. Elis, the land that controls Olympia, guards this sacred site carefully. Violence is common in Greece, but here, at Olympia, weapons are forbidden. Bloodshed is not allowed. This is neutral ground, protected by divine law. The people who gather here come by foot, by cart, sometimes after weeks of travel. They come from villages, from coastal towns, from mountain valleys. Most are farmers, shepherds, craftsmen. Their lives are hard. Food is never guaranteed. Death is close. The gods, they believe, control everything: rain, crops, victory, defeat. And Zeus stands above them all. At first, the gathering is simple: a religious festival, a sacrifice, an offering of animals at the altar. Smoke rises into the sky, carrying prayers with it. Men stand quietly, heads bowed, hoping Zeus will hear them, hoping he will be kind this year. But something else begins to happen here, something human. After the rituals, men start to test themselves, not for money, not for fame, but for honor, for pride, for the approval of the gods and their fellow Greeks. Running is the simplest test. No weapons, no armor, just the body against the earth. One race, a straight line carved into the dirt, about 192 meters long. This distance will later be called the stadion. It is not chosen randomly. It matches the length of the stadium itself, measured by ancient feet. There are no lanes, no starting blocks, no rules written down, just men standing barefoot on the soil, muscles tense, hearts pounding. They run naked. To the ancient Greeks, the naked body is not shameful. It is pure, honest, a gift from the gods. Clothing hides weakness. Nakedness shows truth. Every muscle, every flaw, every strength is visible. When they run, they are exposed, equal human. The crowd is small but intense. Men shout, Some laugh, some pray. The air is thick with dust and sweat. There is no prize of gold or silver waiting at the end. Only a simple olive wreath cut from a sacred tree. But that wreath means everything. It means glory. It means your name will be remembered. It means you stood out among Greeks. The winner of this first recorded race is a man named Corobus of Elis, a cook, they say, not a king, not a general, just an ordinary man who ran faster than the rest. His victory will echo far beyond this dusty track, even though he cannot imagine it. His name will be written down. And because of that, historians centuries later will look back and say, this is where it began. 776 BCE becomes a marker in time. The Greeks will use it to measure history itself, counting years by Olympiads, 4-year cycles between these games. Wars, births, deaths, alliances, all measured from this moment forward. A simple foot race becomes a clock for civilization. But in this moment, no one thinks of legacy. They think of breath, of burning lungs, of aching legs, of Zeus watching. The festival lasts only a few days. Then the crowds leave. Olympia returns to silence. The track fades. Footprints disappear. But something has changed. Word spreads. Men talk about the race in marketplaces and fields, about the honor, about the feeling of standing before all Greeks as an equal. 4 years later, they come back. Again, they run. Again, they crown a victor. Slowly, the gathering grows. More spectators, more athletes, more stories. What began as a religious ritual is turning into something larger, something powerful, a shared identity for a divided people. The Olympic Games are not yet grand, not yet famous, but the seed has been planted deep into Greek soil. A tradition born from faith, competition, and the human need to be seen. And as the years pass, this simple race will not remain alone for long. New contests will emerge, stronger bodies, harder trials, events that will push men to their limits and reshape what it means to be a hero. But before the games can grow, Greece itself must change, and the next chapter begins with a sacred promise, one that forces enemies to lay down their swords and walk together toward Olympia once more. 4 years pass like a slow breath across Greece. Fields are planted and harvested. Children are born. Old men die. City-states fight, argue, betray, and make peace again. Violence is normal. War is constant. Greece lives in a cycle of blood and pride. Yet, as the next Olympiad approaches, something remarkable begins to happen. Messengers are sent out from Elis, the small but powerful land that guards Olympia. These men travel on foot, carrying a sacred message. They walk into rival cities, even enemy territories, and speak words that cannot be ignored. They announce the Echecharia, the sacred truce. For a short time, all wars must stop. Weapons are laid down. Armies pause. Roads roads become safe. Anyone traveling to Olympia is protected, no matter where they come from. To break this truce is to anger Zeus himself, and that is a punishment no city dares to risk. Even kings and generals listen. Even hardened warriors obey. This truce does not mean peace forever. It is fragile, temporary, but it is powerful. It reminds the Greeks that they share something deeper than hatred, a common faith, a common past, and now a common festival. As travelers move toward Olympia, the roads fill with life. You see men with strong legs and scarred hands. You hear different accents, different dialects. You smell dust, sweat, and olive oil. Some come to compete. Others come only to watch. Some bring stories. Some bring prayers. Olympia begins to change. The sacred grove fills with tents and temporary shelters. Fires burn at night. Men sit in circles, sharing bread, wine, and tales of their cities. Rivals meet face to face without swords between them. A Spartan might sit beside an Athenian, a farmer beside a noble. For a few days, social lines blur. The games themselves grow slowly, carefully. At first, it is still just the Stadian race. But the Greeks love competition. They admire strength, speed, and courage. And so, new races are added. Longer races, faster sprints, endurance tests that leave men gasping and collapsing at the finish. Running is no longer just about speed. It becomes about control, about pacing, about knowing your body. Victors train for years, even though there are no professional coaches yet. Training happens in fields, on hills, along riverbanks. Young boys watch the winners and dream. Then comes wrestling. Wrestling is raw and brutal. Two naked men stand face to face, bodies oiled, eyes locked. There are no weight classes, no time limits. The earth beneath them is hard. Victory comes when one man forces the other to the ground 3 times. No strikes, no mercy, only strength, balance, and technique. The crowd loves it. They cheer when bodies crash. They groan when skin scrapes against dirt. Wrestlers become symbols of control and power. A good wrestler is admired not just for muscles, but for discipline, for knowing when to push and when to wait. Soon after, boxing is added. This is not the boxing of later centuries. There are no gloves, only leather straps wrapped tightly around the hands. Punches land on faces, ribs, jaws. Blood is common. Broken noses are expected. Some fighters lose teeth. Some lose consciousness. Yet they keep fighting because quitting brings shame. Then comes the pancration. It is the most feared event of all. A mix of wrestling and boxing with almost no rules. No biting. No eye gouging. Everything else is allowed. Men twist limbs, choke necks, smash bodies into the ground. Death is rare, but it happens. When it does, the dead man is sometimes crowned victor if his opponent surrendered first. The pancration is not about beauty. It is about survival. about dominance, about proving that you are stronger than fear itself. As the games expand, so does Olympia. Simple altars become larger, paths become worn, temporary structures appear to manage the growing crowds. Priests become more organized. Judges, called Hellenodikai, are chosen from Eli's. They wear purple robes and carry long staffs. Their word is law. Cheating is punished harshly. Athletes swear oaths before statues of Zeus. They promise to compete honestly. Those who lie are fined. Their money is used to build statues of Zeus, Zanes, that stand at the entrance to the stadium. Each statue is a warning. Each bears the name of a cheater carved into stone for all to see. Honor is everything here. Victors receive no money at Olympia, only an olive wreath. But when they return home, they are treated like heroes. Cities reward them with food for life, front row seats at festivals, and public praise. Poets write verses about them. Sculptors carve their likenesses. Their names outlive their bodies. Athletes begin to train more seriously. Gymnasiums appear in cities. Men rub oil into their skin, scrape it off with bronze tools, and exercise daily. Strength becomes a form of worship. The body becomes a temple. Yet not everyone is allowed to participate. Women are banned from competing. Married women are even banned from watching, under penalty of death. The games are a celebration of male strength, tied deeply to warfare and citizenship. There is one exception, priestesses of Demeter, who are allowed to observe. Their presence reminds everyone that the gods still rule this place. Young boys, however, begin to have their own events. Races, wrestling matches, training for the future. Olympia is shaping generations. As the days of the festival pass, sacrifices grow larger. Hundreds of animals are slaughtered. Meat is shared among the crowds. Smoke fills the air. The smell of burning flesh mixes with dust and sweat. Prayers are shouted over noise and laughter. At night, fires glow across the plain. Stories are told. Victors sit quietly, wreaths on their heads, listening to their names whispered with respect. Losers stare into the flames, already planning their return. The Olympic Games are no longer just a race. They are becoming a mirror of Greek society, its values, its cruelty, its beauty, its obsession with glory. But as Olympia rises, something else is rising with it. Fame, power, politics. City-states begin to see the games as more than sport. They see influence. They see opportunity. And soon, the gods will not be the only ones watching these contests. As the Olympic Games grow in size and importance, they begin to pull Greece toward Olympia like a powerful tide. What was once a quiet, sacred valley now becomes a stage where the entire Greek world wants to be seen. And where people want to be seen, power always follows. By the early 7th century BCE, Olympia no longer belongs only to the gods. belongs to reputation. City-states begin to understand something dangerous and exciting. Victory at Olympia is louder than victory in war. A battlefield triumph fades with time. An Olympic victory is remembered forever. A man's name is carved into history, and the city that produced him shares that glory. Athletes no longer come alone. They arrive wearing colors of their city. They are surrounded by trainers, supporters, admirers. Some cities fund their champions secretly, feeding them better food, giving them time to train instead of work. Officially, the games are sacred and pure. Unofficially, politics has arrived. Olympia feels different now. The sacred grove is louder, more crowded, more tense. Rival cities watch each other closely. A Spartan victory is cheered loudly by Spartans and silently resented by others. An Athenian win sparks pride, but also jealousy. Every wreath carries meaning far beyond the stadium. The Hellenodikai, the judges, gain more authority. They must control not just athletes, but crowds, tempers, and ambition. Rules become stricter. Training periods are enforced. Athletes must arrive weeks before the games to prove they are ready and disciplined. Those who disobey are whipped publicly. The crowd watches in silence. Olympia does not forgive arrogance. New events continue to appear, each one reflecting what Greek society values most. The pentathlon is introduced, a combination of 5 events: running, long jump, discus throw, javelin throw, and wrestling. This is not for specialists. This is for the complete man. Speed, strength, coordination, endurance, and combat ability, all tested together. To win the pentathlon is to be seen as nearly perfect. The long jump is strange by modern standards. Athletes jump holding stone or metal weights called halters. They swing them forward as they leap, then backward before landing. The rhythm matters. Music is sometimes played to guide timing. The body moves like a weapon trained for precision. The discus flies through the air, spinning, glinting in the sun. The javelin whistles as it cuts across the field. These are not games divorced from war. They are training for it. Every throw echoes the battlefield. And then there are the chariot races. They do not take place in the main stadium, but in the hippodrome, a massive open track. The sound here is different. Hooves pound the earth. Wheels rattle violently. Dust clouds rise so thick they choke the air. Horses scream. Drivers shout. Crashes are common. Death is expected. Chariot racing becomes the most dangerous event of all and the most prestigious. The strange truth is this: the driver does not receive the glory. The owner of the horses does. This opens the games to the elite in a new way. Wealthy men who never train, never sweat, never risk their bodies can still win Olympic crowns. Even women banned from competing can technically become Olympic victors if they own the horses. One Spartan princess does exactly that, shocking the Greek world. Olympia is changing again. Monuments begin to rise. Cities build treasuries, small stone buildings to store offerings and display wealth. Each one is decorated to impress, to intimidate, to announce power. Olympia becomes a gallery of rivalry carved in marble. Statues of victors appear everywhere. Bronze bodies frozen in perfect form. Muscles tense forever. Faces calm, confident, immortal. These statues are not just art. They are statements. Proof that this city produces greatness. Poets arrive too. They recite verses praising champions, comparing them to gods, heroes, lions, storms. Their words travel far beyond Olympia, spreading fame across the Greek world. A victory now lives not only in stone, but in song. But beneath the celebration, cracks begin to show. Athletes push their bodies harder than ever before. Training becomes brutal. Diets are extreme, heavy meat consumption, strict routines, endless repetition. Injuries are ignored. Pain is accepted. To quit is to fail not just yourself, but your city. Some athletes begin to cheat. They bribe opponents. They bribe judges. They lie about their origins. When caught, punishment is swift and humiliating. Fines grow larger. More Zane's statues line the entrance, each one a silent accusation. Olympia protects its image fiercely. Religion remains at the heart of everything, but belief begins to mix with performance. Sacrifices grow more theatrical. Rituals become spectacles. Zeus is still honored, but now he shares the stage with human ambition. And still, one group remains invisible. Women. They are excluded from the stadium, from competition, from glory. Yet their presence is felt everywhere, in prayers for sons, in weaving victory robes, in stories whispered at home. Separate games for women, the Hurrian Games, quietly exist, but they will never match the fame of Olympia. Children grow up dreaming not of peace, but of victory. Young boys practice wrestling in dust. They race barefoot across fields, imagining the roar of the crowd. Fathers speak of Olympia with reverence. Mothers speak of it with fear, because the games no longer belong only to gods or men. They belong to memory, and memory is powerful. As centuries pass, Olympia becomes more than a festival. It becomes a symbol of what it means to be Greek, to speak the same language, to worship the same gods, to compete under the same sky. But the Greek world is not stable. Empires rise, tyrants rule, wars grow larger and more brutal. And soon, forces beyond Greece will turn their eyes toward Olympia, not as worshippers, but as rulers. And when power shifts, even sacred traditions are forced to bend. As the centuries move forward, the Olympic Games settle into a powerful rhythm, returning every 4 years like a heartbeat that all of Greece can feel. Empires may rise and fall, kings may rule and die, but Olympia endures. And yet, the world around it is changing faster than ever. By the 6th century BCE, Greece is no longer just a collection of small city-states struggling to survive. Wealth is growing. Trade spreads across the seas. Colonies rise in distant lands. With prosperity comes ambition, and with ambition comes display. Olympia becomes a place not just to compete, but to announce greatness. When athletes arrive now, they do not come quietly. Processions form. Cities send official delegations. Musicians play flutes and drums. Priests chant prayers as smoke rises from fresh sacrifices. The sacred valley fills with sound, color, and tension. This is no longer a simple gathering of farmers and runners. This is a Pan-Hellenic stage. Every city wants to look powerful here. Tyrants, strong rulers, who seize control of their cities, use the games to legitimize their rule. They fund athletes. They commission massive statues. They build grand treasuries at Olympia, each one larger and more decorated than the last. Stone walls speak silently of wealth and dominance. A visitor walking through Olympia now feels watched not just by gods, but by cities. Sparta stands tall, proud of discipline and strength. Its athletes are feared. They train from childhood, hardened by pain, driven by duty. When a Spartan wins, there is no wild celebration, just quiet approval. Strength is expected. Athens is different. Its champions are praised not just for muscle, but for balance, intelligence, and grace. Victories are woven into poetry, theater, and philosophy. An Athenian athlete is not just strong, he is cultured. Corinth shows off wealth. Argos clings to ancient pride. Each city carries its identity into the stadium, and the crowd feels it. The stands are packed tighter than ever. Tens of thousands gather under the open sky. There is no shade, no comfort, only heat, dust, and anticipation. People stand shoulder to shoulder for hours, waiting to see bodies collide, to see limits break. Silence falls before each event. Then chaos. Wrestlers slam into the ground. Boxers sway on broken legs. Runners explode forward at the signal, feet striking earth like drums. Chariots scream past turning posts, wheels inches from disaster. When crashes happen, and they often do, the crowd gasps, then roars. Pain is entertainment now, but it is also meaning. The Greeks believe excellence, arete, is the highest goal of life. To push beyond normal limits is to touch the divine. An Olympic victor is not just admired. He is believed to be favored by the gods. His success suggests order in a dangerous world. This belief gives the games enormous emotional power. When a city suffers famine, defeat, or plague, an Olympic victory can heal pride. When tensions rise between rivals, triumph in the stadium becomes symbolic revenge. The games absorb the fears and hopes of an entire civilization. Yet this power creates pressure. athletes train relentlessly. Many live their lives entirely for the games. They follow strict routines, eating heavy meat diets meant to build mass and strength. They lift stones. They run uphill. They fight through injuries that would cripple ordinary men. Their bodies become tools. Some do not survive long after their victories. Stories spread of champions who collapse young, worn down by years of punishment. But these stories do not slow the pursuit. Glory is worth the cost. Olympia itself grows heavier with monuments. Statues crowd the pathways. Some are graceful. Some are aggressive. Some depict athletes mid-motion, frozen forever in effort. Others show gods, heroes, mythical figures. The line between human and divine begins to blur. The temple of Zeus rises, massive, imposing, awe-inspiring. Inside it stands a statue unlike anything the Greek world has ever seen. Zeus, seated on a throne crafted from gold and ivory, towering over all who enter. His eyes seem alive. His presence is overwhelming. People whisper that if Zeus were to stand, he would tear the roof apart. Before this statue, athletes swear their oaths. Parents pray for sons. Victors thank the god who allowed them to rise above others. Fear and reverence mix in the air. But not everyone comes to Olympia to compete or worship. Philosophers arrive, eager to speak and debate. Thinkers like Pythagoreans discuss harmony and numbers. Others argue about the nature of strength, the soul, and virtue. Olympia becomes a marketplace of ideas as much as bodies. Artists come to study form. Politicians come to make deals. Alliances are discussed quietly beneath olive trees. Announcements are made publicly, knowing the whole Greek world is listening. The games become a communication network before writing spreads widely. Yet, with all this growth, the ideal of purity begins to strain. Money flows more openly now. Some athletes are clearly supported by wealthy patrons. The line between amateur and professional fades. While officially forbidden, rewards back home grow larger. Houses, money, privileges, lifelong meals at public expense. Olympic glory becomes a career. This disturbs traditionalists. They worry the games are losing their sacred soul. That competition is replacing worship. That men chase crowns more than divine favor. Still, the crowds grow. And somewhere beyond Greece, new powers are rising. Persia expands east and west, swallowing lands, armies marching beneath foreign banners. The Greek world feels threatened, fragile. When war finally comes between Greece and Persia, it will test everything the Greeks believe about themselves. And when that war arrives, the Olympic Games will face a question they have never faced before. Can sacred tradition survive when survival itself is at stake? The answer will not come peacefully. The shadow of war stretches across Greece long before the first Persian soldier sets foot on its soil. Rumors move faster than stories of vast numbers, endless wealth, and kings who command entire continents, fill marketplaces, and training grounds alike. Persia is not just another enemy. It is something the Greeks have never faced before. And yet, the Olympic Games continue. Even as tension grows, the sacred truce is still proclaimed. Messengers still walk the roads. Olympia still calls the Greek world together. In a time of fear and uncertainty, the games become more important than ever, not just as sport, but as proof that Greek identity still holds. When the Persian Wars finally erupt in the early 5th century BCE, Greece is tested to its core. Cities that once competed for wreaths now fight side by side for survival. Marathon, Thermopylae, Salamis, Plataea, names that will echo through history. Ordinary men become legends. Sacrifice becomes sacred. During these years, Olympia feels different. The athletes who arrive now carry scars. Some have fought in battle. Some will return to it. Their strength is no longer symbolic, it is practical. When they wrestle, box, or run, the crowd does not just see sport. They see survival. They see warriors proving that Greece still stands. Victories at Olympia during this time feel heavier, more emotional. Each crown feels like defiance, like a message to the world. We are still here. After the Persian threat is pushed back, Greece enters a strange new age. Confidence floods the cities. Pride swells. Athens rises as a cultural and political power. Sparta remains strong, disciplined, unyielding. The Greek world feels victorious, but also divided. The Olympic Games reflect this perfectly. The scale grows again. Crowds swell larger than ever before. More events are added. More days are needed. Olympia becomes a place of celebration after trauma, a release of tension after years of fear. But peace does not last. The rivalry between Athens and Sparta deepens into the Peloponnesian War, a long, brutal conflict that tears Greece apart from within. Brother fights brother. Former allies become enemies. Cities starve. Plague spreads. And still, the games continue. Even during war, the sacred truce holds, at least officially. Athletes from enemy cities stand side by side once more, naked and unarmed, pretending for a moment that blood has not been spilled. The contrast is painful. Some athletes refuse to acknowledge rivals. Others use victory as silent insult. The stadium becomes a battlefield without weapons. A Spartan victory during wartime is met with cold silence from Athenians. An Athenian triumph draws tight-lipped stares from Spartans. The games are no longer just about excellence. They are about pride sharpened by hatred. Olympia itself becomes more crowded, more overwhelming. Temporary tents turn into more permanent structures. Roads improve. Officials grow stricter. Schedules are tightly controlled. Everything must run smoothly because because chaos waits just beyond the sacred boundary. The judges are under immense pressure. One unfair decision could spark violence. They enforce rules harshly, publicly, without apology. Whippings are more common, disqualifications more dramatic. Olympia must appear pure, even when Greece is not. Athletes grow more specialized. Runners train only to run. Wrestlers focus solely on grappling. Boxers destroy their hands and faces in endless practice. The ideal of the complete man still exists, but specialization brings better results. Victories become narrower, sharper, more intense. The pentathlon begins to lose some prestige compared to single-discipline champions. A man who is the best at one thing is now admired more than one who is good at many. This shift changes the spirit of the games. Athletes become more extreme. Diets grow heavier. Training routines become secretive. Techniques are guarded like military tactics. Some cities even attempt to steal trainers or sabotage rivals. While rare, these acts happen in whispers, never openly admitted. Money flows more freely than ever, while Olympia itself still awards only olive wreaths. The real rewards wait at home. Victors return to cities that treat them like living monuments. Parades fill the streets. Crowds throw flowers. Politicians praise them publicly. Laws are passed granting lifelong privileges. Some athletes become rich beyond imagination. This creates a new class of men, famous, admired, powerful, but not rulers. Their influence is strange and dangerous. They are used by politicians, celebrated by crowds, envied by peers. Fame becomes intoxicating. Philosophers begin to question this obsession. Thinkers like Socrates and later Plato speak critically about excessive focus on the body. They argue that strength without wisdom is empty, that a society obsessed with physical victory risks forgetting justice and truth. Their words spread quietly, but they do not stop the crowds. People still want heroes they can see. Olympia becomes a place where these tensions collide, body versus mind, war versus peace, tradition versus ambition. Religious rituals continue, but belief changes subtly. Zeus is still honored, but the gods feel farther away. Victory feels earned more than granted. Human effort begins to overshadow divine will. Statues now emphasize realism over idealism. Muscles strain. Faces show effort. Artists capture pain, not just perfection. The games no longer pretend that excellence is effortless. And yet, despite war, politics, money, and doubt, the magic of Olympia survives. When the starting signal is given, everything else disappears. For a moment, there is only breath and movement, only bodies pushing against fate. Only the ancient promise that here, in this sacred valley, humans can still rise above chaos. But Greece is weakening. The endless wars drain resources and spirit. city-states grow tired. Unity feels like a memory. And beyond Greece's borders, new powers watch patiently. Macedon rises quietly in the north, and with it comes a young prince who will change everything, not just for Greece, but for Olympia itself. The north is cold compared to southern Greece. The land is rough, the people harder. While Athens argues and Sparta drills, Macedon grows quietly, almost unnoticed. To many Greeks, Macedonians are not even fully Greek. They speak strangely. They live simply. They are ruled by kings, not councils. They seem backward. That belief will not survive for long. In the 4th century BCE, a man named Philip II takes the throne of Macedon. He is wounded, clever, patient, and dangerous. He studies Greece carefully, not just its armies, but its culture, its pride, its weaknesses. Philip understands something others miss. Greece is exhausted. Decades of war have hollowed the city-states. Their armies are smaller. Their unity is gone. Their confidence is loud, but thin. And while they argue over old rivalries, Philip builds something new. A professional army. Not citizens who fight part-time, but soldiers trained constantly, armed with long spears called sarissas, drilled to move as one body. Discipline replaces chaos. Strategy replaces pride. One by one, Greek cities fall or submit. And when Philip finally controls Greece, he does something unexpected. He does not destroy the Olympic Games. He embraces them. Philip knows the power of Olympia. He knows that to rule Greece, he must appear Greek. So he sends athletes. He funds monuments. He dedicates offerings to Zeus. He wins victories, not just in war, but in the stadium. When Philip wins an Olympic chariot race, his name is announced to the entire Greek world. His legitimacy is sealed not by force alone, but by tradition. Olympia accepts him. And then comes his son, Alexander. Alexander grows up hearing stories of heroes, Achilles, Heracles, gods, and kings. He trains his body relentlessly. He learns philosophy from Aristotle himself. Strength and thought are fused within him. By the time he takes the throne, he is unstoppable. Alexander does not just conquer lands, he reshapes the world. As his armies march east, Greece changes forever. The old city-state system fades. A new era begins, the Hellenistic age. Greek language, culture, and ideas spread across Egypt, Persia, and beyond. Cities rise with Greek theaters, gymnasiums, and temples. And wherever Greek culture goes, the Olympic ideal follows. Olympia itself becomes more international. Athletes now arrive from far beyond mainland Greece. Asia Minor, the islands, colonies along distant coasts. Greek identity is no longer tied only to birthplace. It is tied to language, education, and participation in shared traditions. The games become bigger. More days, more spectators, more complexity. The festival now includes not only athletics, but music contests, poetry recitals, and dramatic performances. The line between sport and culture fades further. Yet, with expansion comes distance. The Olympic Games begin to feel less intimate, less sacred, more monumental. Olympia is crowded beyond imagination. Vendors sell food and trinkets. Performers compete for attention. Politicians make speeches knowing the whole Greek world is watching. Announcements of alliances, wars, and decrees echo through the valley. The games are no longer just a mirror of Greece. They are a stage for the world Greece has created. Athletes become celebrities in a way never seen before. Their faces are known, their habits discussed, their rivalries followed across multiple Olympiads. Some compete again and again, chasing immortality. Training becomes more scientific. Doctors study bodies. Diets are adjusted carefully. Massage, oiling, scraping, and rest become ritualized. Injuries are treated with herbs and techniques passed down through generations. Some athletes push their bodies to unnatural extremes. Death still happens. Occasionally, a boxer collapses and never rises. A pancration fighter dies with his opponent's grip still around his neck. When this happens, the crowd falls silent, not with horror, but with grim respect. To die in the games is tragic, but also honorable. This acceptance of death reveals something deep about the ancient world. Life is fragile. Glory is eternal. Olympia teaches this lesson relentlessly. Meanwhile, wealth concentrates. Elite patrons openly sponsor athletes now. What was once hidden becomes normal. While the games still claim sacred purity, professionalism is no longer denied. Some athletes make entire careers from victory to victory, traveling from festival to festival across the Greek world. Olympia remains the highest prize, but it is no longer the only one. Other games rise: Delphi, Nemea, Isthmia. Together, they form a circuit. Athletes chase crowns like hunters chase prey. Fame becomes portable. This changes the audience. Spectators grow more demanding. They have seen greatness before. They want more drama, more dominance, more spectacle. Mediocre performances are forgotten instantly. Only the extraordinary survives. Judges face constant pressure. Accusations of favoritism increase. Cities argue. Appeals are made. Fines grow massive. The line of Zane's statues grows longer, stretching like a warning through the entrance. Religion still exists, but it is quieter now. Sacrifices continue. Oaths are sworn. Zeus still watches, but belief has shifted. The gods feel distant, abstract. Human achievement stands in the foreground. Philosophers debate this endlessly. Some argue that the games uplift humanity, that they prove discipline, excellence, and order. Others argue that they glorify vanity, violence, and excess. That bodies are worshipped more than virtue. Both sides have evidence. Olympia contains everything beauty and brutality, honor and corruption, unity and rivalry. And then, far to the west, another power rises. Rome. At first, Rome seems insignificant, a rough city of soldiers and farmers. They admire Greek culture deeply. They copy Greek art, philosophy, and religion. To them, Greece is ancient, refined, superior. When Romans visit Olympia, they are overwhelmed. They marvel at the statues, the rituals, the history. Roman nobles compete in Greek games. Roman emperors will later fund monuments. Some even demand victories be granted to them. But admiration slowly turns into control. As Rome expands, Greece becomes a province. Armies march not as visitors, but as rulers. Taxes are collected, governors appointed. The Greek world is no longer free. Olympia feels this shift immediately. Roman officials attend the games, sitting in positions of honor. Latin mixes with Greek in the crowds. Roman money flows into the valley. Buildings are repaired, expanded, reshaped. At first, this seems like salvation. Rome brings stability. Roads improve. Security increases. Attendance grows. The games continue without interruption. But something subtle is lost. The Olympic Games were born as a meeting of equals, Greek cities bound by shared gods and culture. Under Rome, equality fades. Power is centralized. Decisions come from far away. Some emperors respect the games deeply. Others use them. One emperor enters multiple events and conveniently wins them all. The crowd applauds, but the applause is forced, hollow. Everyone understands the lie, but no one dares speak. The sacred truce still exists, but it means less. Rome controls war and peace now, not Zeus. Olympia survives, but it is no longer untouched. Statues of emperors stand beside statues of gods. Imperial symbols mix with sacred ones. The games continue, but they feel heavier, burdened by politics beyond Greece. And still, athletes run, they wrestle, they fight, they bleed. They chase crowns older than Rome itself, because tradition is powerful, because memory is stubborn, because even empires rise on borrowed foundations. But the world is changing again. A new belief is spreading quietly through the Roman world, one that questions gods, idols, naked bodies, and violent spectacles. It speaks of one God, not many, of humility, not glory. And when that belief reaches Olympia, it will not ask to share space. It will demand an end. The Roman world stretches wider than anything Greece ever imagined. Roads cut across continents. Armies move with terrifying speed. Laws, taxes, and orders flow from distant capitals. And yet, in the middle of this vast empire, Olympia still stands. Old, sacred, stubborn, like a stone that refuses to be moved by the river of time. For centuries under Roman rule, The Olympic Games survive by adapting. Roman governors protect them. Emperors praise them. Wealth pours in. Repairs are made to temples cracked by age. New buildings rise beside ancient ones. The stadium is expanded. The hippodrome is maintained. On the surface, Olympia looks stronger than ever, but strength is not always health. The meaning of the games begins to drift, slowly, almost invisibly. For the ancient Greeks, Olympia was identity. It was proof of belonging. Under Rome, it becomes heritage. Something admired, preserved, even celebrated, but no longer essential to life itself. Roman spectators do not grow up dreaming of Olympic crowns. Their heroes fight in arenas, not stadiums. Gladiators spill blood for entertainment. Chariots race in circuses that hold hundreds of thousands. Compared to that, Olympia feels restrained, quiet, old-fashioned. Still, tradition holds power. Roman elites send their sons to train in Greek gymnasiums. They commission statues in Greek style. They speak Greek as the language of culture and education. Olympia becomes a museum that still breathes, a living relic. Athletes continue to arrive from across the empire. Greeks from Asia Minor, Romans from Italy, even men from distant provinces who have learned Greek ways. The definition of who belongs keeps stretching, but the soul of the games weakens. The sacred truce is no longer sacred. It exists on paper, but Roman legions do not stop marching because of Zeus. War ignores Olympia now. Peace is enforced by soldiers, not gods. Judges still wear their robes. Oaths are still sworn. Sacrifices are still made. But belief feels thin, like a ritual repeated too many times without conviction. Statues crowd every path. Too many. Victory monuments are no longer rare honors. They are expected. Olympia feels heavy with stone and bronze, with memory piled upon memory. Then, quietly, something new enters the empire. At first, it is barely noticed. Small groups gathering in houses. Strange prayers. No sacrifices. No statues. No games. They speak of one God, unseen and absolute. A God who does not live in temples made by hands. A God who values humility, suffering, and mercy. Christianity. In the early centuries, Christians are powerless, persecuted, mocked, ignored. Olympia does not notice them at all. Why would it? What threat could such a belief pose to traditions older than Rome itself? But Christianity grows, slowly, relentlessly. It spreads through cities, through families, through soldiers, through slaves. It speaks to people exhausted by violence, inequality, and endless competition. It offers meaning without spectacle. To Christians, the Olympic Games are troubling. Naked bodies displayed for admiration. Violence celebrated as excellence. Pagan gods honored with blood sacrifices. Glory pursued for its own sake. All of this feels wrong to a belief built on modesty, restraint, and spiritual salvation. At first, Christians simply avoid the games. Then they speak against them. They call them immoral, corrupt, empty. They say the games glorify the body and forget the soul. They say idols are lies. They say true victory is not won in a stadium. These words spread quietly, but they do not yet threaten Olympia. Then the empire changes. In the early 4th century CE, Emperor Constantine converts to Christianity. Suddenly, the faith of the persecuted becomes the faith of power. Temples still stand, but their future is uncertain. Pagan rituals are no longer protected by default. Olympia feels this shift like a distant tremor. The games continue. Constantine himself allows them to survive. He respects tradition. He does not want chaos, but the balance has changed. Paganism is no longer safe. It must justify itself. Over the decades, laws slowly tighten. Sacrifices are restricted. Pagan festivals lose funding. Temples fall into disrepair. Priests grow fewer. Olympia begins to decay, not in stone, but in spirit. Attendance drops. Fewer athletes travel long distances. Some cities stop sending competitors altogether. Younger generations raised in Christian homes do not feel drawn to naked contests honoring old gods. The crowds thin. The sacrifices shrink. The atmosphere feels hollow. Still, the games refuse to die easily. They have survived wars, empires, and centuries of change. They adapt again, shedding some rituals, emphasizing tradition over belief. Olympia becomes more cultural than religious, more historical than sacred. But Christianity does not compromise. To its leaders, pagan festivals are not harmless traditions. They are threats, reminders of beliefs they seek to replace entirely. Tolerance fades. Pressure increases. Temples across the empire are closed or destroyed. Statues are smashed. Altars abandoned. Pagan priests lose authority. Olympia watches this happen elsewhere, waiting. The end comes not with drama, but with decree. In 393 CE, Emperor Theodosius issues laws banning pagan rituals and festivals. The Olympic Games, once protected by gods and emperors alike, are declared illegal. Just like that. No final race, no last wreath, no farewell ceremony. The games simply stop. The valley falls silent. The stadium empties. Weeds grow where feet once pounded the earth. The hippodrome fills with dust. The temples are abandoned. Zeus watches over no one. Earthquakes strike in later years, toppling columns and statues. Floods bury structures under layers of mud and sand. Olympia disappears from memory, becoming legend. For over 1,000 years, the Olympic Games exist only in texts, in poems, in fragments of history studied by scholars and monks who do not fully understand what was lost. The world moves on. empires rise and fall again. New religions dominate. New sports appear. New ways of measuring greatness replace old ones. But something ancient remains buried beneath the soil of Olympia. A memory of bodies running under open sky, of enemies laying down weapons, of humans chasing excellence not for money, but for honor. That memory sleeps for centuries, waiting, and one day, far in the future, hands will dig into the earth, brush away the dirt, and uncover stone once touched by gods and men. And when that happens, the Olympic story will begin again, not as it once was, but as something reborn from ruins. For centuries, Olympia is nothing more than a whisper in old books, a name passed down through crumbling manuscripts, copied by monks who no longer worship Zeus and cannot imagine naked athletes racing for olive wreaths. The stadium is gone, swallowed by earth and time. The temples lie broken, scattered like bones beneath layers of mud. Rivers shift their paths. Earthquakes shake the valley. Nature patiently erases what humans once believed would last forever. And yet, memory refuses to die. During the Renaissance, scholars across Europe begin to look backward. They rediscover Greek and Roman texts. They read about Olympia with fascination and confusion. How could an entire civilization stop its wars just to run races? How could sport be sacred? These questions linger unanswered, like echoes from a forgotten world. Still, no one acts on them. The modern world is busy with empires, revolutions, science, and machines. Strength is measured in cannons and factories, not in bodies. Nations compete through conquest, not competition. The Olympic idea sleeps on, buried deep. Then, in the 18th and 19th centuries, something changes. Europe becomes obsessed with antiquity. Ruins are no longer ignored. They are studied, measured, admired. Archaeologists begin digging through ancient lands, searching for the physical proof of old stories. And in Greece, recently freed from Ottoman rule, the land itself begins to speak again. In 1829, French archaeologists arrive at Olympia. They dig carefully, slowly, unsure of what they will find. The soil is heavy. The work is exhausting. Days pass with nothing but broken stone and fragments. Then, gradually, shapes appear. Foundations, columns, carved blocks. A stadium emerges from the earth, long and narrow, exactly as described in ancient texts. The world is stunned. Olympia was real. The temples, the altars, the gymnasium, the workshop of Phidias, where Zeus himself was once crafted, all of it comes back into the light. Statues are unearthed. Inscriptions are read. Names of athletes reappear after more than 1,000 years of silence. The past suddenly feels close, tangible, alive. This rediscovery ignites imagination across Europe. Writers, artists, and thinkers begin to romanticize ancient Greece as a golden age of balance, beauty, and harmony. Physical education becomes fashionable. Gymnastics spread through schools. The body, once seen mainly as sinful or mechanical, is reimagined as something noble again. And in France, a young man begins to dream. His name is Pierre de Coubertin. Coubertin grows up in a world shaped by war and defeat. France has recently lost to Prussia. National pride is wounded. Coubertin believes the problem is not just military, it is physical and moral. He looks to ancient Greece and sees a solution. Sport as education, competition as character building, physical struggle as a way to shape better citizens. When Coubertin learns about Olympia, something clicks. He studies ancient sources obsessively. He imagines athletes from different nations competing peacefully, not as enemies, but as rivals bound by rules and respect. He believes sport can do what politics cannot, bring nations together without bloodshed. The Olympic idea awakens. Coubertin does not want to copy the ancient games exactly. He knows that world is gone. The gods are gone. The sacrifices are gone. But the spirit, the idea of peaceful competition, of excellence, of shared humanity, that can be reborn. In 1894, Coubertin gathers delegates from many nations in Paris. He speaks passionately about reviving the Olympic Games. Some laugh, some doubt, some listen carefully. The idea feels impossible, too idealistic, too old. But the world is changing again. Nations are growing restless. Tensions rise. People fear another great war. Coubertin's vision feels hopeful, almost desperate. A way to compete without killing. A way to celebrate strength without destruction. Slowly, support grows. An international committee is formed. Athens is chosen as the site for the first modern Olympic Games. The choice is symbolic, emotional, perfect. Greece, poor and struggling, embraces the idea with pride. Ancient stone meets modern ambition. In 1896, the Olympic Games return. Not in Olympia, but in Athens. Athletes arrive from 14 nations. They wear uniforms. They compete clothed. Women are still excluded, just as in ancient times. Events are different now: gymnastics, fencing, cycling, but the core remains. Bodies pushing limits under watchful eyes. When the marathon is run, tracing a path inspired by ancient legend, the crowd goes wild. A Greek runner wins. The stadium erupts. People cry. It feels like history closing a circle. The modern Olympics are born, but they are not ancient Olympia reborn. They are something new. National flags replace city-states. Anthems replace hymns to Zeus. Medals replace olive wreaths. Politics follows quickly, just as it did long ago. Pride, rivalry, and power return to the stadium. Still, the ancient heartbeat can be felt beneath it all. Every 4 years, the world gathers again. Athletes swear oaths, different ones now. Judges enforce rules. Crowds cheer. Records are broken. Bodies strain. Dreams are won and lost in moments measured by seconds. The Olympic flame is lit, inspired by the sacred fire of Olympia, carried across continents. A symbol borrowed from a forgotten altar, given new meaning. And far away, in the quiet valley of Olympia itself, the ruins remain. Tourists walk where athletes once ran naked under the sun. Children stand where Zeus once towered in gold and ivory. The wind moves through broken columns, carrying a story that refuses to stay buried. Because the Olympics were never just games. They were a reflection of humanity, its need to compete, to belong, to prove worth, to reach for something higher than survival. And that need did not die in 393 CE. It only slept, waiting for the world to remember. The modern Olympic Games grow quickly, almost too quickly. What begins as a fragile revival in Athens soon turns into a global phenomenon. Each edition grows larger, louder, and more complex. New nations join. New sports appear. Stadiums rise like modern temples of concrete and steel. The world watches, and slowly, the Olympics become one of the most powerful symbols on Earth. But just like the ancient games, the modern Olympics are never pure for long. From the beginning, nationalism seeps in. Athletes no longer represent themselves or their cities. They carry flags, histories, and political weight. A victory is no longer just personal. It becomes a statement. A loss becomes a wound to national pride. The stadium becomes a peaceful battlefield. The Olympic ideal speaks of unity, but the world is divided. Empires still exist. Colonies still suffer. Inequality remains everywhere. And when nations gather under one sky, they bring their conflicts with them. The games are cancelled during World War I, then again during World War II. The silence feels familiar, like ancient Olympia after its final decree. War, once again, proves stronger than sport. But each time, the games return, and each time they return changed. Women slowly enter the Olympic stage, at first cautiously, then defiantly. They run, swim, jump, and throw. They face resistance, mockery, and exclusion, but they stay. What ancient Olympia denied, the modern world slowly corrects. Athletes grow faster, stronger, more specialized. Science enters training fully. Nutrition, biomechanics, psychology, every aspect of the human body is studied, optimized, pushed. Records fall so often they barely have time to settle into memory. The ancient Greeks would not recognize these bodies, and yet they would understand them. Because the hunger is the same, to be the best, to stand above others, if only for a moment. But with progress comes temptation. Just as ancient athletes cheated and bribed, modern athletes face new forms of corruption. Performance-enhancing drugs promise strength without years of suffering. Some take them, some are caught, some are not. Scandals erupt, medals are stripped, trust erodes. The line of Zane's statues has returned, only now they are court rulings, headlines, and public shame. Politics grows heavier. The Olympic Games become stages for protest and propaganda. Athletes raise fists. Nations boycott. Governments use ceremonies to display power and unity, even when neither truly exists. The ideal of separating sport from politics proves impossible. It always was. Olympia knew this long ago. The modern Olympics struggle with the same contradictions as the ancient ones. Unity versus rivalry, honor versus ambition, tradition versus change. And yet, something keeps them alive. When an athlete stands alone at the starting line, all of that noise fades. The world narrows. There is only breath, tension, and the moment before movement. In that instant, ancient Olympia lives again. The crowd holds its breath. The signal sounds, and humanity watches itself try. The Olympic flame continues to travel the world, lit in the ruins of Olympia, carried by hands young and old. A ritual reborn not as worship, but as remembrance. Each torchbearer becomes a link in a chain stretching back nearly 3,000 years. Still, the future feels uncertain. The games grow expensive. Host cities struggle. Stadiums are abandoned. Critics ask hard questions. Is the cost worth the spectacle? Is the ideal still real, or just branding wrapped in tradition? These questions echo ancient doubts. Even in classical Greece, people worried the games had lost their soul. And yet, they continued, because humans need shared rituals. They need moments that feel larger than everyday life. Moments where the world stops arguing long enough to watch someone run faster, jump higher, or endure more pain than seems possible. The Olympic Games survive not because they are perfect, but because they are human, flawed, aspirational, contradictory, like the civilizations that create them. And now, as the world moves deeper into an age of technology, virtual connection, and constant distraction, the Olympics face their greatest challenge yet. How do ancient rituals survive in a digital world? How do bodies matter when screens dominate attention? How does a tradition built on physical presence compete with endless information? The answer is not yet clear, but somewhere a child watches the games and feels something stir, a desire to move, to compete, to belong. And as long as that feeling exists, the story of the Olympics is not finished. It is still unfolding. The Olympic Games now live in a world the ancient Greeks could never have imagined. Screens glow in dark rooms across every continent. Billions watch events in real time, separated by oceans, but connected by images moving at the speed of light. A single race, lasting less than 10 seconds, can be replayed forever. Every movement is slowed, analyzed, judged. The moment no longer belongs only to those present. It belongs to history instantly. And yet, beneath all this technology, the games are still fragile. Each Olympiad arrives carrying the weight of the world around it. Economic crises, political tension, pandemics, climate fear. The games do not escape reality, they absorb it. When cities compete to host, they promise unity and legacy, but often inherit debt and empty stadiums. Concrete monuments rise quickly and age even faster. Questions grow louder. Who are the games really for? Athletes feel this pressure more than anyone. They train for years, sometimes decades, for moments that last minutes or seconds. Their lives narrow into routines of pain, repetition, and sacrifice. Many give up normal childhoods. Friendships fade. Injuries become permanent companions. And when the moment finally arrives, there is no guarantee of reward. One slip, one mistake, one false start, and it is over. The ancient Greeks understood this cruelty. They knew excellence demanded suffering. They accepted it openly. The modern world pretends to soften it with sponsorships, cameras, and applause. But the cost remains. Bodies still break. Minds still struggle. Some athletes leave the games with medals. Others leave with silence. Yet the silence is never complete. Because the Olympic Games still create moments that stop the world. A runner stumbles, then rises, finishing last, but refusing to quit. The crowd stands, not for victory, but for resilience. A competitor from a small, unknown nation wins gold, and a flag few recognize is raised high, proving that greatness has no address. Rivals help each other across finish lines. Tears fall during anthems. Hands shake after battles. These moments feel ancient. They feel older than nations, older than politics, older than cameras. They feel human. The Olympic ideal has changed many times, but it has never disappeared. It has worn different faces: Greek honor, Roman spectacle, Christian rejection, modern nationalism, global branding. At times it has been noble, at times hollow, at times deeply flawed, but it keeps returning because it answers a question humans never stop asking. How do we measure ourselves? Not against machines, not against wealth, but against other humans under the same rules in the open. This is why the ancient stadium mattered. This is why the modern one still does. Every Olympic cycle begins with doubt. Every cycle ends with memory. People forget the controversies faster than they forget the moments that made them feel something real. A race watched with family. A late-night final. A victory that made strangers cheer together. These shared memories are rare now. The world is loud, divided, distracted. Algorithms feed isolation. Screens pull people inward. But the Olympics pull attention outward, even briefly, toward a shared story unfolding in real time. For a few days, the world watches the same thing. That alone is powerful. The flame still begins its journey in Olympia, lit among ruins where birds nest in broken stone. There are no sacrifices now, no prayers to Zeus, but the act itself is symbolic. Fire taken from sunlight, a reminder of origins, a reminder that everything modern is built on something old. The flame travels across cities and borders, carried by runners of all ages and backgrounds. Each one holds it briefly, knowing they are part of something far larger than themselves. Then they pass it on, just like history. The ancient Greeks passed on an idea they could not fully control. The Romans preserved it without understanding its soul. The modern world revived it with hope and ambition. Each generation reshaped it according to its fears and dreams. Now it belongs to a future we cannot yet see. The Olympic Games will change again. They must. New sports will appear. Others will fade. Rules will shift. Technology will push limits further. Debates will grow louder. There may be more cancellations, more crises, more doubts. But somewhere, someone will still run. Someone will still jump. Someone will still test the edge of what the human body can do. And somewhere else, someone will still watch, feeling their heart race in response. That is the thread connecting Olympia in 776 BCE to the present moment. Not gods, not empires, not medals, but the simple act of witnessing human effort. As long as humans care about effort, about struggle, about the beauty of trying even when failure is certain, the Olympic story will continue to find a place in the world. Not as perfection, but as reflection. A mirror held up to humanity, showing who we are, who we were, and who we still hope to become. By the time the ancient world began to change under new powers, the Olympic Games had already lived many lifetimes. What began as a local religious festival in a quiet valley of Eli's had become something far greater than the people of 776 BCE could ever imagine. Now, as we move deeper into the later centuries of ancient Greece, the Olympics stood at a crossroads, balanced between sacred tradition and a world that was slowly losing its old gods. The valley of Olympia still looked much the same. The Alpheus River continued its slow journey past olive groves and dusty paths. The temple of Zeus still towered over the sanctuary, its massive statue watching silently as athletes trained, prayed, and competed. But the people arriving now came from a different world. Greece was no longer just a collection of city-states arguing and fighting among themselves. The shadow of larger empires had begun to stretch across the land. After the conquests of Alexander, the Great, Greek culture spread far beyond the Aegean Sea. Greek language, art, and customs traveled east into Asia and south into Egypt. And wherever Greek culture went, the idea of the Olympic Games followed. Athletes from distant lands, now dreamed of standing in Olympia, even if their homes lay thousands of miles away. To compete, there was still the highest honor a man could achieve. Yet, something subtle was changing. In earlier centuries, Olympic athletes were often farmers, shepherds, or soldiers who trained as part of daily life. Now, more and more competitors were professionals. They trained year-round, supported by wealthy patrons or city-states eager for glory. Victory was still crowned with olive leaves, but fame now brought money, gifts, free meals for life, and statues in stone and bronze. The Olympics were still sacred, but ambition was growing louder. The events themselves expanded further. Combat sports became more brutal. Boxing and pankration pushed the human body to its limits, sometimes beyond them. Fighters entered the arena knowing they might leave broken, or not leave at all. There were no rounds, no time limits, no weight classes. The sun beat down on bare skin slick with oil and dust as crowds roared, not in horror, but in awe. Pain was part of the spectacle. Even so, the games still paused wars. The Olympic truce remained respected, at least in theory. Messengers continued to travel across the Greek world, announcing the sacred peace. Armies laid down weapons, so athletes and spectators could pass safely. In a world increasingly shaped by violence, Olympia remained one of the last places where peace was not just hoped for, but required. But then came Rome. At first, Roman involvement felt distant. Rome admired Greek culture deeply. Roman elites studied Greek philosophy, copied Greek art, and sent their sons to be educated by Greek teachers. To the Romans, the Olympics were ancient, noble, and worthy of respect. Roman officials attended the games not as conquerors, but as students of Greek tradition. Over time, however, admiration turned into control. As Greece fell under Roman rule, Olympia did too. The games continued, but now under the watchful eyes of Roman governors. The language of the games remained Greek, the rituals unchanged on the surface, but power had shifted. Decisions about funding, repairs, and organization increasingly depended on Rome. Some Roman emperors embraced the Olympics with enthusiasm. They poured money into restoring temples, repairing stadiums, and expanding accommodations. Crowds grew larger than ever before. Athletes traveled from across the vast Roman Empire, from Spain to Syria, from North Africa to the edges of Europe. Olympia became a meeting place not just for Greeks, but for the entire Mediterranean world. One emperor, Nero, took this fascination to an extreme. He did not just attend the Olympics. He competed. Rules were bent. Events were rearranged. Nero declared himself winner in competitions he clearly did not deserve to win. Judges, under pressure, crowned him anyway. Statues were raised. Praise was forced. For the first time, the games felt fragile, as if tradition itself could be twisted by power. Yet, even during moments like these, the spirit of Olympia refused to die completely. Ordinary athletes still trained in silence. Spectators still gasped at feats of strength and endurance. Old priests still performed ancient rituals exactly as their fathers had taught them. Beneath the noise of empire, the heartbeat of the old games continued to pulse. But another force was rising, one that would challenge the very foundation of the Olympics. Christianity was spreading across the Roman world. Its followers rejected the old gods, rejected sacrifices, rejected festivals dedicated to Zeus and Hera. To them, Olympia was not sacred. It was pagan. At first, this new belief existed quietly alongside old traditions. Christians lived in cities, worshipped in secret, and avoided public rituals. The Olympics continued, but as centuries passed, Christianity gained power, protection, and finally dominance. What had once been forbidden became official. The temples of Olympia began to feel abandoned. Sacrifices grew fewer. The meaning of the games, once deeply religious, now felt hollow to many. Athletes still ran, wrestled, and fought, but the gods they honored were no longer widely believed in. The sacred fire still burned, but fewer people felt its warmth. When Emperor Theodosius, I officially banned pagan festivals in the late 4th century CE. The fate of the ancient Olympic Games was sealed. The games that had begun in 776 BCE, that had survived wars, plagues, and empires, were finally silenced. No announcement was made. No final ceremony was held. They simply stopped. Olympia grew quiet. Grass crept over the stadium. Earth swallowed fallen columns. Floods from nearby rivers buried temples in mud and sand. Earthquakes shattered what time had spared. The valley that once echoed with cheers and prayers became a place of ghosts and memories. For centuries, the world forgot where the Olympics had truly begun. But history has a strange way of breathing again. Beneath the soil of Olympia, stories waited. Broken statues, rusted weights, inscribed names of champions long dead. The games were gone, but not erased. And far in the future, in a world shaped by machines and modern nations, someone would remember the olive wreath, the sacred truce, and the dream of peaceful competition. And as the dust of ancient Olympia settled into silence, the idea of the Olympics began its long sleep, waiting for a time when humanity would once again ask itself whether competition could bring unity instead of war. A question that would rise again in a very different age. For centuries after the ancient Olympic Games fell silent, Olympia remained buried beneath layers of earth, memory, and neglect. The world moved on. Kingdoms rose and collapsed. New religions reshaped belief. New languages replaced the old. The names of ancient champions faded into dust, spoken only by scholars who studied broken texts under candlelight. To most of humanity, the Olympics were no longer a living tradition. They were a legend, half real, half myth. The Valley of Olympia became farmland. Shepherds led goats across land where runners once thundered barefoot. Farmers plowed fields over what had once been sacred ground. No crowds gathered. No trumpets sounded. Zeus no longer watched over contests of strength and speed. The gods of Greece had become stories, and stories alone. Yet, even in silence, the idea of the Olympics did not completely die. Ancient writers like Pausanias had described Olympia in careful detail centuries earlier. They wrote of the stadium carved into earth, the temples glowing with marble, the statue of Zeus so large it nearly touched the roof. These words survived in manuscripts, copied and recopied by monks who may not have believed in the gods, but understood the value of preserving knowledge. During the Renaissance, when Europe began to rediscover the ancient world, scholars read these texts with fascination. They imagined the games. They debated them. Some even attempted small athletic festivals inspired by ancient Greece. But these were scattered, symbolic, and short-lived. The true Olympic spirit remained buried, both literally and figuratively. It was not until the modern age, when archaeology emerged as a serious discipline, that Olympia began to wake from its long sleep. In the 18th and 19th centuries, explorers and scholars traveled across Greece searching for ruins described in ancient texts. When they reached the region of Elis, they found hints. Broken columns, fragments of stone, a landscape that felt older than memory. Then, in the late 1800s, systematic excavations began. As soil was removed layer by layer, Olympia slowly revealed itself. The stadium emerged first, its long track still clearly defined despite centuries of burial. The temple of Zeus followed, its fallen columns scattered like giant bones. Pieces of statues appeared, faces without bodies, bodies without heads, frozen in stone. Archaeologists stood in awe. This was not myth. This was real. The place where the Olympic Games had been born still existed. As discoveries spread through Europe, imagination caught fire. Writers, artists, and thinkers spoke again of the Olympics, not as ruins, but as an idea. A powerful idea. One that connected physical excellence, fair competition, peace, and shared humanity. In a world increasingly divided by nationalism, war, and industrial change, the ancient games suddenly felt relevant again. At the center of this revival stood one man, Pierre de Coubertin. Coubertin was a French educator who believed deeply in the power of sport to shape character. He saw modern education as incomplete, too focused on the mind, and not enough on the body. While studying history, he became fascinated by ancient Greece and the Olympic Games. To him, They were not just athletic contests. They were a philosophy of life. Coubertin imagined a world where nations competed without hatred, where young people learned discipline, respect, and honor through sport. He believed that international athletic competition could reduce conflict, not increase it. The ancient Olympic truce inspired him deeply. If Greeks could pause wars for sport, why couldn't modern nations do the same? He spoke passionately. He wrote tirelessly. At first, few listened. But Coubertin did not stop. In 1894, he organized an international congress in Paris. Representatives from multiple countries attended. There, Coubertin proposed something bold: the revival of the Olympic Games, not as a Greek festival, but as a global event. Nations from around the world would compete, united under shared rules and ideals. The idea was risky. Many doubted it would work. Others argued that ancient traditions could not survive in the modern world. Some feared nationalism would corrupt competition. But the vision was too powerful to ignore. The decision was made. The Olympic Games would return. Athens was chosen as the host city for the first modern Olympics in 1896, honoring the birthplace of the ancient games. Preparations began quickly. Stadiums were restored. Athletes were invited. The world waited, curious and uncertain. When the games opened, they were modest compared to modern standards. Fewer sports, fewer athletes, no global media coverage. But something extraordinary happened. As competitors marched into the stadium, representing different nations, the ancient spirit stirred. Runners raced again, not for olive wreaths, but for honor. Wrestlers grappled. Weightlifters strained. Spectators cheered not just for victory, but for effort, for participation, for the shared experience of competition without war. The Olympics were alive again. They were not perfect. Women were excluded at first, just as they had been in ancient times. Politics still influenced decisions. Inequality and conflict did not disappear, but the foundation was laid. A bridge had been built between ancient Olympia and the modern world, and from that moment forward, the Olympic Games would continue to grow, evolve, struggle, and inspire. They would survive wars, boycotts, scandals, and tragedy. They would reflect humanity at its best and worst. But all of it traced back to that quiet valley in Greece, where barefoot runners once raced under the burning sun, believing the gods were watching. And as the modern Olympics began their journey, carrying ancient ideals into a new age, a deeper question remained unanswered. Could this reborn tradition truly honor its origins, or would it slowly drift away from the values that once made it sacred? As the modern Olympic Games moved forward into the 20th century, they carried ancient dreams on modern shoulders. The idea was beautiful, almost fragile. Nations competing in peace, athletes meeting as equals, the world watching not war, but effort. Yet reality, as it often does, tested that dream again and again. The early modern Olympics grew quickly. Each new host city added more events, larger stadiums, and greater ambition. Track and field expanded. Swimming pools replaced rivers and seas. Gymnastics, fencing, cycling, and rowing found their place. The games became a showcase of human movement, measured now not by myth or legend, but by seconds, meters, and kilograms. But the world outside the stadium gates was changing fast. Industrialization transformed cities. Empires stretched across continents. National pride hardened into rivalry. Flags began to matter more than individuals. Victories were no longer just personal achievements. They became symbols of national strength. When an athlete won, an entire country felt taller. When one lost, disappointment spread far beyond the track. Slowly, politics crept into the games. The Olympic flag, with its 5 interlocking rings, was designed to symbolize unity across continents. But unity proved difficult. In 1916, the games were canceled due to World War I stadiums that might have hosted races, instead echoed with marching boots and artillery drills. Young men who might have competed died in trenches instead. When the Olympics returned in 1920, the wounds were still fresh. Some nations were excluded. Others arrived with heavy hearts. The spirit of peace was present, but fragile, like glass under pressure. Still, the games continued, because stopping entirely would mean surrendering the dream. Then came Berlin, 1936. The games were awarded to Germany before the rise of the Nazi regime. But by the time athletes arrived, the Olympics had become a stage for propaganda. Flags waved. Speeches thundered. The ancient idea of fair competition was wrapped tightly in political theater. The world watched uneasily. And yet, in the middle of that tension, something extraordinary happened. Jesse Owens, a Black American athlete, dominated the track and field events. He ran, jumped, and sprinted past expectations, winning gold after gold. His victories shattered the false ideas of racial superiority that surrounded the games. Without speeches or protests, his body told the truth. It was a reminder of something ancient. In Olympia, only performance mattered. Not wealth, not birth, not politics. Just what a human could do in that moment. But the world kept testing the Olympics. World War II canceled the games again, this time in 1940 and 1944. Cities burned. Millions died. The Olympic flame went dark, waiting patiently as history tore itself apart. When the games finally returned in 1948, the world was exhausted. Rationing was still common. Many athletes trained in ruins, with little food and worn-out equipment. These were called the austerity games. No grand celebrations, no luxury, just competition, just survival. And somehow, that made them powerful. As decades passed, the Olympics grew into a global spectacle. Television brought the games into living rooms. Athletes became stars. Sponsorships poured in. The line between amateur and professional blurred, then vanished entirely. Training became scientific. Records fell faster. The human body was pushed closer and closer to its limits. But with growth came shadows. Doping scandals exposed athletes chasing victory at any cost. Boycotts turned the games into political weapons. Terror struck the Olympic Village in Munich in 1972, shattering the illusion that sport existed outside the world's violence. The games paused, not for ritual, but for mourning. Still, they continued. Every time the Olympics faced collapse, they adapted. Rules changed. Security tightened. New sports emerged. Women finally gained greater representation, breaking barriers that had stood since ancient times. Athletes from countries once excluded now stood on podiums, their flags rising, their anthems playing. The Olympics became a mirror of humanity. When the world was hopeful, the games felt joyful. When the world was divided, the games felt tense. They carried triumph and tragedy side by side. And yet, beneath the cameras, contracts, and controversies, something ancient still survived. Athletes still felt fear before competition, still trained alone before dawn, still dreamed of standing on a stage where millions would watch, but only seconds would decide everything. That feeling was the same one a runner felt in 776 BCE, standing barefoot on the dirt of Olympia, heart pounding, sun rising. The Olympics were no longer just about Zeus, or olive wreaths, or city-states, but the core idea remained stubbornly alive. That human beings, no matter where they come from, share a desire to test themselves, to prove something, not only to others, but to themselves. As the modern games continued to expand into the 21st century, reaching every corner of the planet, a quiet question lingered beneath the celebration and spectacle. With so much money, power, and politics involved, could the Olympics still protect that ancient heart? And as athletes prepared for future games, chasing records that once seemed impossible, the spirit born in ancient Olympia watched closely, waiting to see whether humanity would honor competition as a bridge between people, or allow it to become just another battlefield without weapons. As the Olympic Games moved deeper into the modern age, they entered a time of reflection, struggle, and quiet questioning. The world had become faster, louder, and more connected than ever before. Satellites circled the Earth. The internet shrank distances. News traveled instantly. And the Olympics, once a simple gathering in a dusty Greek valley, now unfolded under the gaze of billions. The opening ceremonies grew grand and theatrical. Fireworks lit the sky. Dancers filled stadiums. Technology painted stories across massive screens. Each host nation tried to tell the world who they were, where they came from, and what they stood for. Ancient rituals were still present: the lighting of the flame, the athlete's oath. But now they shared space with lasers, drones, and global branding. For many viewers, the Olympics became a celebration, a rare moment when the world paused to watch the same event, a time when people cheered for athletes they had never met, from countries they might never visit. For a few weeks, borders felt thinner, differences felt quieter, but behind the beauty, tension continued to grow. Hosting the games became incredibly expensive. Cities promised prosperity, renewal, and pride, but often delivered debt, empty stadiums, and displaced communities. Protests began to follow the Olympic flame wherever it traveled. Some asked whether the games still served people, or whether people were now sacrificing too much for them. Athletes, too, faced new pressures. Training had become relentless. Expectations were crushing. A single mistake captured on camera could define a career forever. Social media turned victory into instant fame and failure into public judgment. The mental weight was heavier than ever before. Some athletes began to speak openly about anxiety, depression, and burnout. This honesty was new. In ancient Olympia, suffering was hidden behind strength. In the modern games, vulnerability slowly found a voice. It reminded the world that behind every medal stood a human being, not a machine. Politics never truly left the Olympics, no matter how much organizers tried to keep them separate. Nations still used victories to signal power. Conflicts outside the stadium echoed inside it. Athletes sometimes became symbols without choosing to be. Silence itself could become a statement. And yet, moments of pure humanity still broke through the noise. A runner stopping to help a fallen competitor. Two rivals embracing after a brutal final. An underdog winning against all odds. Tears streaming down their face as they realized their life had changed forever. These moments spread across the world, shared not because they were perfect, but because they were real. The Olympic flame continued to burn, passed from hand to hand, country to country. It no longer belonged to one place or one people. It belonged to an idea, fragile, imperfect, but powerful. Even global crises could not fully extinguish it. When the world faced pandemics, wars, and uncertainty, the games were postponed, reshaped, and restricted, but not erased. Empty stadiums replaced roaring crowds. Masks replaced smiles. Still, athletes competed. Still, records were broken. Still, the flame was lit. This persistence carried an echo from the past. Ancient Olympia had survived invasions, earthquakes, and the fall of gods. The modern Olympics survived global collapse, fear, and doubt. different ages, same resilience. But as the games looked toward the future, a deeper conversation emerged. What should the Olympics be? A business, a spectacle, a political stage, or a space for shared humanity? Environmental concerns added another layer. Climate change threatened winter sports. Rising temperatures challenged summer events. The planet itself seemed to question endless expansion. Organizers began to speak of sustainability, reuse, and responsibility. Ideas far removed from the ancient world, yet strangely aligned with its respect for balance. The Olympics stood once again at a crossroads, much like they had in late antiquity, not facing disappearance, but transformation. The choices made now would shape how future generations understood competition, unity, and purpose. And somewhere beneath the modern stadiums, beneath concrete and steel, the spirit of ancient Olympia still whispered its lesson. That competition is most powerful when it honors effort over dominance. That strength means nothing without respect. That peace, even temporary, is worth striving for as the world prepared for the next chapters of the Olympic story. One final question lingered quietly in the background, waiting to be faced. If the ancient games were born from faith, and the modern games from hope, what would the future Olympics be born from? And the answer to that question would shape not just sport, but the story humanity tells itself next. The story of the Olympic Games, stretching across nearly 3,000 years, does not truly end in a stadium, a medal ceremony, or a closing flame. It ends and begins again inside the human spirit. From a dusty valley in ancient Olympia to towering arenas of glass and steel, the games have always reflected who we are at that moment in time. In 776 BCE, they were born from belief in gods, in fate, in the idea that excellence was a form of worship. Men ran not just to win, but to honor something greater than themselves. The earth beneath their feet was sacred. The silence before the race was holy. As centuries passed, belief faded, but the games did not disappear. They transformed. They absorbed new meanings, new hopes. When the modern Olympics rose from the ruins of ancient Greece, they were no longer about Zeus or Hera. They were about humanity trying, once again, to come together without swords, without borders, without hatred, if only for a moment. And that moment has always mattered. Every 4 years, the world still pauses. Wars may rage. Politics may divide. Economies may struggle. But somewhere, athletes gather, carrying flags, dreams, and years of sacrifice on their shoulders. They step into arenas knowing the odds, knowing the pressure, knowing that history is watching, even if only briefly. In that instant before competition begins, time bends. A runner waits for the signal. A gymnast steadies their breath. A swimmer grips the edge of the pool. In those seconds, They are no longer representatives of nations or systems. They are simply human beings standing at the edge of effort, just like the athletes of ancient Olympia once did under the Greek sun. The crowd holds its breath, and then movement. Feet strike the ground, muscles strain, hearts race. The body answers a question as old as history itself. How far can I go? Victory still brings joy. Defeat still brings pain. But both reveal truth, not about superiority, but about dedication. Not about dominance, but about limits, and sometimes the courage to push beyond them. The Olympic Games have never been perfect. They have been interrupted, manipulated, commercialized, and politicized. They have reflected humanity's flaws just as clearly as its ideals. Yet they endure because the core idea refuses to die. That idea is simple. Competition does not have to mean destruction. Strength does not have to mean violence. Difference does not have to mean division. In a world that often forgets these truths, the Olympics quietly remind us. They remind us that a truce is possible. That respect can exist between rivals. That the body, when disciplined and focused, can become a language understood everywhere. No translation needed. No permission required. Ancient Olympia is silent now. The stadium is empty. The temples are broken. The gods are gone. But the echo remains. It lives in every athlete who trains before sunrise, in every child who dreams of running faster, jumping higher, or standing proudly with a medal around their neck. In every moment when the world watches not destruction, but effort, the Olympic flame, carried across continents, is not just fire. It is memory. It is hope passed from one generation to the next. It says that despite everything, despite history, despite failure, despite time, we still believe in trying together. And perhaps that is the true legacy of the Olympic Games. Not the records, not the medals, not the ceremonies, but the quiet, stubborn belief that humanity is capable of meeting in peace, testing itself with honor, and walking away changed, even if only a little. The runners of 776 BCE could not have imagined our world, but they would recognize the moment before the race begins. The silence, the tension, the shared breath, and in that moment, across thousands of years, the story continues.